Hi guys, thanks for tuning in again. I'm Ian McCollum and I'm here today with Mr. Ken Hackathorn, and we're taking a look at this pig of a submachine gun. Thompson. What we have here is an M1 Thompson, the simplified World War II version, and this is an interesting firearm in that it has a tremendous popularity in just American pop culture. Absolutely. This is like the quintessential American submachine gun. Gangsters, John Wayne, Marines, everybody. It must be a fantastic gun. And yet, amongst a lot of people who are serious firearm shooters, not collectors, but shooters, that's not really how the Thompson's seen. I personally really just like, ugh.
And by the way, it's actually, image-wise, almost universal. You go all over the world, and the image of a Thompson submachine gun is kind of like, it's like the image of, say, a single-action Army Colt.
Right.
People see that and they think American cowboy. It's America. Yep. Believe it or not, the Luger has an image. At least it did at one time. The Thompson is a uniquely iconic American firearm.
Yeah.
And by the way, probably more mythology to it than most American small arms, in the sense that people accredit it with things that it can't do. The people brag about it. I'll give you an example. One of the classic ones, I was growing up, I used to, again, talking to World War II vets, and you would ask about the Thompson submachine gun. Oh, if you shoot that thing, if you weren't careful, it would just climb clear up over your head. Well, that tells you they never fired one. It's a heavy gun.
This thing weighs more than an M1 Garand.
Yeah. I used to do a demo where I would take it out and say, okay, you all heard that, right? And with one hand, and dump a magazine, 3-round magazine. It'll go up a little bit, but it just stays right there and chugs away. So again, everybody likes to claim, well, when I was in the Army, I carried a Tommy gun. I love the guys that, Vietnam vets, yeah, I carried a Thompson when I was in it. And you go, really? That is a heavy slug.
Yeah.
And when you carry the spare magazine support, it's a lot of weight. They were not as popular as everybody thinks. I tell people, when you talk to same thing, World War II vets about the Thompson and what they thought about it is the guys that were tankers, or the guys that the gun was carried in a Jeep or in a vehicle, it was a popular weapon. The guy had to hump it.
I'm sure he wasn't.
I never talked to anybody who said, gee, that was my choice in a weapon. Nobody. I remember one of my buddies in high school, my early shooting buddy, Mike Patterson, and his father's name was Gerald Patterson, and he'd fought in the Pacific, a Marine. And he was not a very big fan of the Thompson. He was actually somewhat, believe it or not, he liked the M1 carbine far better than he did the Thompson. He was not a big fan of the Thompson. He said, but we carried it for one reason. One guy in a squad would carry the Thompson. It was such a slug, you rotated that responsibility on a daily basis. But when it came time that somebody had to go up and clear a Japanese pillbox, you passed up the Thompson.
Okay.
A couple spare mags you stuck in your pocket, and a handful of grenades that you get to them, because the guy who had to crawl up, pitch the grenades through the firing slit, and then run around the back and clear it with a firearm, the Thompson was the gun of choice. It worked superbly.
Okay,
but after that, nobody had any use for it.
I think there's, getting slightly off topic, I think there's a bit of a misconception about how combat in the Pacific often worked, in that it was kind of like specific directed target objectives. Like, we're going to clear that pillbox. We don't have, it's not like World War I where there's a whole line of guys trying to go forward simultaneously.
And it tended to be, by nature, jungle terrain.
Yeah.
And in close range engagements compared to Europe. Now, in Europe, the same thing. I've talked, as most people know, when we conceptualized the airborne divisions as kind of, if you will, shock troops, the submachine gun initially, probably more of them were issued and deployed on D-Day by the 82nd and 101st per capita than any other time in American history of submachine guns.
Okay.
And if you look at any of the old footage or still photos, you'll see guys loading on the C-47s with Thompson submachine gun strapped. And the grease gun had not come online yet.
Right.
So they were used, but what the guys learned is, if you're fighting it out at 20 meters, a Thompson can be pretty efficient. If you're fighting it out at 100 meters, it's got a trajectory like a loaded toolbox, let's be honest. And it's just not a very...
They're heavy.
They're clumsy. Another thing, by the way, like we talked about the carbine, we accepted a level of reliability in an unloading weapon in that era that we wouldn't accept today. They were never as reliable as people want you to believe. Again, they have to be well lubricated. So again, the springs were better then, and the guns were probably more reliable. But you know, that one, for example, has a fixed sight. You can't adjust the sights. My experience with those, I've got one. Mine's a great old gun, doesn't shoot to the sights, and there's not much any way to fix it. I've actually bent the front sight here, but not enough to change the point of impact to where it needs to be. So, and I tell you one unique thing about the Thompson, a lot of people don't. If you look at it, the design and the angle of stock, there's a lot of drop. For conventional fire.
It's a very awkward gun to shoot.
Fire, it's not really that comfortable. If you tuck it in your armpit and fire it like they do in the movies, believe it or not, with a little practice, you can do pretty well with it.
Okay.
Surprising. I mean, I love demoing it. Again, at what we'll call Cqb distances. This technique is it's the old deal. Wherever your eye looks, you keep the muzzle where your eye is, and you can shoot it fairly effectively.
Okay.
As you all know, long burst with a 45 caliber submachine gun is not a real good idea. But if you're shooting 2 to 3, 4, 5 round bursts, you can do fairly well with it. But I've yet to meet anybody that said, "Oh, gee, that was my preference in weapon to carry." It's just stupid heavy.
The reason we had that thing is because it was really the only practical choice.
That's all we had
in the war, and they pretty much immediately started looking for alternatives.
Yeah. And it's kind of interesting. I mean, the cost of making this gun. This is back in the day. One of these machines, it was terrible then. You can imagine what.
I remember some of the data when Thompson was selling them to the Brits. It was $200 a piece, and they were charging gold bullion.
Yeah,
they weren't getting that. The Brits weren't getting them on credit.
Yeah,
and
so I tell people it's an iconic weapon. Its image is projected in movies and television to be. It's not what everybody thinks. It's actually more complex than people believe. No, this was certainly a simplified version.
Right,
but.
Yeah, the early ones with the blish lock, there's a lot going on inside there.
Very, and by the way, you know, they always played around with cycle rates. The original 21 Thompsons that we all think about, the gangster guns, cycle rate were too fast. The 28 A1s were basically, the government, the Marine Corps bought them, as you know, actually the Navy were the purchasing. And one of the things was you've got to slow it down. And one of the things they did do with the 28 A1 is they reduced the cyclic rate from, say, 21s are close to 900 rounds per minute. Most people don't realize that. They're really fast. They slowed the 28 A1s down to about 7.
Okay.
And if you shoot one, it's dramatically more controllable. And by the time they simplified this gun to a direct blowback without the bleach system and all that, actually the cycle rate tends to go up more like 800. It's like an MP5. And in 45, it's pretty lot of movement. So. Yeah. I tell people, these guns were around. We gave them to everybody after World War II. Every other country got a bunch of them. But I don't know anybody that will say, I carried one in combat exclusively and I loved it. I've never heard that.
The grease gun, for all that it looks like a horrible plumbing disaster.
It's actually far superior.
It's a great gun. Yeah.
One of the interesting things with submachine guns, all submachine guns of this era, is if you look at original 21 or 28, remember it had the Lyman sights. Actually, the sight system was pretty worthless.
Yeah.
If you folded it up the aperture was so small you couldn't see anything. If you folded it down, it was not very good. In many ways, this aperture sight was better. And if you ever look at an M1, it has a hole which basically is for like 50 meters, and then on the top it's got a notch which is like for 100 meters.
Okay.
Because the 45, it's got that
substantial
rainbow trajectory.
Yeah.
But again, I always tell people this set the stage for a submachine gun. We would call this a first generation gun.
Right.
We quickly discovered that, and let's face it, the MP40, MP38, and 40 really were the nucleus for the future development of submachine guns.
Right. Yep. Stampings, simplicity.
The box magazines. This system in World War II, the drum looks good in the movies, not very practical.
The drums fell off. They had problems with the magazine catch not being strong enough.
So this gun was set up for a box magazine. Again, everybody I ever talked to, 30s were the norm, 20s nobody had much use for.
If I remember correctly, they started with 20s and then went to 30s.
Quickly. That was an early complaint. We need more rounds. And so they went to you can imagine if you had a 20-round mag and this gun at the cyclic rate, probably 4 or 5 pulls of trigger, you got an empty gun.
Right. Yeah, that's not much.
So putting another 10 rounds in, man, you got at least 2 or 3 more trigger pulls.
Yeah. The Ricing was this, or the UD42 was the same way. High rate of fire, 20-round mags.
But if you're a gun guy, you look at all steel, beautiful walnut. I mean, probably the butt plate's the only stamping in the entire gun.
And that might even be milled too.
Yeah, and this thing is obviously a stamping, but I mean, overall, it's a cool gun from a collector standpoint or from a historical standpoint. And everybody I know, you say you ought to shoot one once.
Right.
You know, and I tell people, if you get a chance to shoot one, you know, buy the ammo, buy good quality ammo. I get people say, I want to shoot a Thompson. Fine. I don't want to shoot your reloads in my gun or commercial reloads. I want good quality ammo. These things are brutally expensive today. And, you know, so, but I tell you, buy enough ammo so you can load up a 30-round magazine and put it like this and do a movie. Just burn a magazine. It's not, without practice, it's a waste of ammo, but God, it's a good feeling. You know, it's kind of say, okay, this is part of being an American, to be able to go out and run one of these. But having said that, as submachine guns go, it was really obsolete by the time this gun was in issue.
Right.
And after World War II and after we saw the submachine gun's popularity peak, development went way up. Through the 50s, submachine guns still were popular around the world. I told everybody the MP5 was the final, to me, evolutionary step in submachine guns. And it's without a doubt the best one that's ever been made. I'm a huge fan of it, but let's be honest, it's still popular in many places in the world, as you know.
Yeah, very.
But having said that, especially the more compact, short versions of various assault rifles have basically made that an obsolete platform.
Right. Yeah, people are kind of going away from submachine guns in general these days.
You still see them in Europe in the law enforcement applications quite a bit. But, you know, even they're starting to evolve towards the super compact assault
5.56 carbines.
5.56 and stuff. But, yeah, that to me is as good as your submachine gun has ever been. And this, from a historical context, is way cool.
Well, you think about that. 1921 is when the first commercial Thompsons were actually being sold. That's 3 years after the first submachine guns ever.
Yeah.
It's a really early gun. I think a lot of people think of it as a World War II gun, but it's not. That's really more like a World War I gun.
Yeah, and most people, if you're a firearms buff, you know that this gun was designed originally as a concept of the trench group.
Right.
That once the troops get into the trenches, then the 03 Springfield with a bayonet was really not a very handy weapon. The Germans let it field again. If you go back and look at the MP18,
right.
They were actually used in combat. Unfortunately, the tide had turned. But we quickly said, we got to do something different. And Colonel Thompson, or General Thompson at the time, to his credit, said, I've got an idea. And he made the first prototype, I think in 1919.
Yeah, the Annihilator.
And so he was thinking in terms, this is our response. And of course, we were 45 caliber pistol oriented, so he built it for a 45 cartridge. And by the way, once it was introduced, the military lost all interest in it. They didn't want it. He kind of struggled.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The company did not do well.
No.
They eked by on a few little orders for a long time.
And sadly, a lot of people remember this thing as a gangster gun.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. Well, that's why the British didn't buy them in the first place. The British looked at these in particular and kind of submachine guns in general as the guns of ne'er-do-well gangsters.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, remember there was a famous picture of Winston Churchill holding a 28A1 Thompson with the drum.
Yep.
You know,
and a cigar.
And a cigar. And he was portrayed in an image, because remember in England, like America today, politics were, you know, there were two parties, and some people, the opposite party was very conservative, very anti-conservative party, and a lot of them were very anti-Winston Churchill, and they was portrayed as a gangster because of that photo.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so I tell people, cool gun, but it's kind of like the 03 Springfield.
Yeah, that's a good comparison.
It's a cool gun, beautifully made. In its time, it was really a good weapon. But in a lot of ways, you look at the 03 Springfield, candidly, by the time it was kind of its involvement, and it went through a lot of stages, but by the time in World War II, when we basically entered World War II with 03 Springfield, most people don't realize that. It was already an obsolete.
Long obsolete, yeah. It was obsolete in World War I. They had a 1917 Enfields that were better.
And again, if you look at again, to kind of diverge, but if you look at the 1917 Enfield, if nothing else from the sight picture, is a superior weapon.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think in a bunch of ways it was. So for people who aren't maybe intimately familiar with the MP5, what is it that makes this the best submachine gun ever?
One is, again, the H&K, basically, this is in essence, an involvement of the G3 concept, the roller locking system. It's shrunk down to a pistol cartridge. And because Germany was still and Europe was very submachine gun oriented, they said, well, we've got to build a compatible submachine gun to our product line, and the MP5 was the end result. One of the most unique things that made it different than submachine guns that were common is it's a closed bolt design.
Right.
Most open bolt guns, like a Thompson, you've got a real heavy mass to the bolt. That's part of the retardant and controls the cyclic rate.
Right.
Is lighter the mass, the faster the guns are. Well, the problem is when the bolt's back and you've got, say, a 3-pound chunk of steel, and you pull the trigger, kaboom, and the gun is disturbed.
And you'll see that at the end of someone's magazine.
Oh,
and that's not a flinch. That's 3 pounds of mass going forward.
It's that way with a Sten gun or an Uzi, or you see that in all of them. This thing, because it's closed bolt, eliminates that issue.
Right. So it's far more accurate.
From an accuracy and control standpoint, this is gun range supreme. It's got a good trigger.
Okay.
Compared to other submachine gun, typically. The selector is mounted on, this is a later one with the ambi controls, but the selectors, you've got safe all the way down. You've got semi, one shot. This one's 3-round burst and then full auto. And the bottom line is, so the one drawback to this weapon platform, and I've trained a few folks with MP5s over my life, and one of the drawbacks design-wise, if you hold an MP5 like you would normally grasp it, reaching the safety. Now, I've got a big hand, so I can actually reach it, but it's not easy to disengage. It's hard.
Yeah.
You have to learn. One of the tricks of the MP5 is you put the buttstock on the outside of your arm, which allows your hand to roll around and get good leverage on the selector. Okay. So this is your ready gun position. And what you do is when you want to deploy it, one click, somehow you're ready to go. With the ambi, a lot of guys run the safety with the trigger finger.
Okay.
And it's easier. But the standard MP5 SEF group is on the left side, and some people say, well, I want an extension. And they did actually make an extended selector, but most places in the world you get the standard one, and you just got to remember, if the buttstock's inside your arm, you're going to have a hard time taking off safety. If the buttstock's on the outside, allows your hand to roll around right to there, and you can drive it. So control-wise, accuracy-wise, by the way, the lifespan of these guns is amazing.
Okay.
I've trained places around the world where the MP5s the guys were using, and in some places in the world they do keep accurate records of how many rounds the guns fire. And I've had guys in classes with guns that have 75,000 rounds from. Now, they've had to replace some parts, but the guns do hold up well.
That's not bad for a stamped receiver.
And again, remember, the Germans, H&K is an interesting company. They over-engineer everything. And, for example, one of their requirements is that you can lodge a bullet in the barrel of any HK firearm and shoot a bullet behind it, and the barrel will not fracture or rupture or cause any damage. And even that goes to the 5.56. That's one of the requirements. Most cases is if you drive, a lot of times you'll drive both bullets out. And you have a bulge in the barrel, but guess what? The gun will still work. They're that anal about this stuff. They designed a magazine, probably, in my opinion, the best submachine gun magazine in history. The original ones were straight, and they learned that feed angle was better with a curved mag. It's a dual feed. It's easy to load. Single feed submachine gun magazines are a bitch.
Kind of suck.
One of the beauties of the Thompson is dual feed.
Yeah.
Easy to load. But these things, my experience is they're incredibly rugged. It's rare to find a bad one unless they've been allowed to rust.
Okay.
Or abused to the lips are bent. Every once in a while I've seen ones with a cracked lip. But most time these things are incredibly reliable.
Now, you can't really load that with a full mag on a closed bolt, can you? You have to lock this open.
The system that routinely taught, I've taught for years, is, by the way, it doesn't have a hold open. Right. The way you know your gun's empty, you get a click. And first thing is, hand locks the bolt to rear, old magazine out, fresh magazine comes up in. Remember, you always in and give it a tug.
Right.
And then back into the fight. If you practice it, you can do it really quick.
Okay. That actually is a place where that freaking stupid forward charging handle is kind of convenient because your hand's already out there. And in the latter years that I was teaching MP5, particularly, out of the United States, was in the era which red dot sights were becoming the norm.
and you mount a red dot sight with any kind of an HK claw mount or whatever, when you do this, your hand hits the mount or the red dot, and it becomes, not only is it harder to do, I see guys that tear the shit out of their hand, because if it's got like a pick rail type thing, the cart corner, oh man, they're bleeding like stuck peas. Design-wise, I don't think anything will eclipse this. I think the era of submachine guns has passed by us. Still popular in European police circles. Some places in Asia, they're still real popular. But most places, the assault rifle, particularly the compact ones, these things are becoming kind of pieces of history.
And I don't know that there's a whole lot more improvement that can be made on a submachine gun.
No, I think this is, to me, is the epicenter.
It really is the semi-auto, the closed bolt nature of that.
Yeah.
That really makes the gun lighter, because you no longer are just dependent on bolt mass to keep it closed when it's firing.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things, and I've trained a few folks with these, and one of the things that I always say is, look, I'm going to teach you to shoot at full auto. The technique to control in full auto. And remember, it's technique. It's not the gun, it's technique.
And it's different than semi-auto.
Yeah, and I tell people, and I'm going to teach you, because if you're overly aggressive and you go to semi and you go past it, and you don't have time to correct in a fight, you got to go. So I'm going to teach you how to control that burst for effective hits. And the system I teach works pretty good out to about 20 meters for a competent shooter. But ideally, you want to be on semi, and I teach 3 shots, not double taps, 3 shots, bam, bam, bam. And it's got to be fast, pop, pop, pop. And with practice, you can do exceptionally well. And I tell people, remember, you're shooting for a grapefruit-sized target in the real world. That's what you're shooting for. And to pound 3 rounds in somebody's sternum, pop, 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 is generally real effective. You know, even with ball ammo, it's pretty effective.
I believe that.
And but I said, well, you're going to learn to shoot full auto, but that's not going to be your primary method. And since these guns were particularly in the hands of counter-terrorist or anti-terrorist unit, that's who I was training, you're responsible for every bullet you launch. You know, I said, if you manage to shoot the wrong person or whatever, the whole society is going to be down on you because you were reckless. So you got to account for every round.
Look at Beslin, or the Paris shooting. Yeah. You got an entire concert full of good guys.
Yeah, I got shot.
You don't want to be shooting up. Yeah.
So, in my mind, I mean, I'm a big MP5 fan. I've got, I got a few. Good investments, by the way. They went up in value dramatic. I tell you, certain things about them. One is you always want the aperture set on the biggest hole. Okay. Because you want to see as much as your zone as you can. And I have guys argue, well, if they're on a small aperture, shoot more accurately. So it's not a target match, man. Yeah. And there's been a lot of upgrades. There are different sight configurations. Tritium front. Surefire made a flashlight handguard, which everybody uses in the real world. Everybody, because you got to ID your target. Yep.
That one's set up with a nice quick detach mount for a suppressor.
Yeah, and a lot of people like cans on them, which became all the rage. HK, of course, had their flash hider component and stuff. Over the years, the negatives I've found with this gun is that you use them a lot. Eventually, this gets real rocky. You can still use it because when you basically, to control a submachine gun, your shoulder presses the gun forward, muscle tension, and these 2 fingers primarily is what pulls back. Equal tension. Okay. All this hand does is manipulate and fire the gun. It has nothing to do with control. And if push-pull, equal muscle pressure both ways, you basically rob the inertia of this gun to bounce around. Okay. And one of the things with an MP5, of course, if you've got the bend in the A3 stock, with use they do get worse. I mean, this one's got a little bit because obviously been shot some. When they're new, they're real tight, and when they've been used a lot, man, they got a lot of play. The other thing is you got to be careful if you use this technique. Now, remember, a lot of people want to hold a sub gun like this. If you're holding any magazine-fed weapon at the magazine, that's the pivot point in the gun. Right. So you're going to allow that muzzle to go up. The closer you get to the muzzle, the better control you have. Also, the closer your fingers are up here. Yeah. And I've actually been present. Didn't happen on my range, but I've been present when a guy was shooting one of these and did this. Self-correcting, by the way.
You probably only do that once.
Remember that deal, Farm OSHA Bill thing that Jim Carrey used to do on TV about, getting hurt or whatever? I mean, that's kind of what you see as and holy shit, it's gone. To the point where actually there were some companies that made little guards that fastened on the front of the hand guard that had a shield that kept your hand from going up.
Yeah, a little hand stop.
So, And then a lot of guys early on converted to pistol grips. They would take like a M16 pistol grip and bolt them on here, and with, you know, Devcon, plastic steel, something, they would, and by the way, work quite well.
Okay.
SAS were some of the first to do that stunt. Of course, red dot sights became the norm. The A2, the solid stock, is actually a better shooting platform.
I
dude, it ain't
believe
cool.
that.
It's not cool. And I always tell people,
It's still
the trick with a MP5, guys like to walk around, in the movies they're shooting blanks, so it doesn't matter.
Right.
But the technique is you unlock it and pull it back a little ways. So when you're in a vehicle or where you want compactness, but when you need to deploy it, once it's unlocked, you do that and you're in action. So I say there's a soft spot in my heart because I made my living teaching people to use these for quite a while. And but I'll be the first to tell you, I don't know if I would reach for one unless it was the only thing I had. There's probably other guns that would get the job done better. But again, another icon. And in the movie industry, thanks to movie, these two guns in many ways are the most recognizable, popular image submachine guns in history.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Well, cool. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that little romp through the Thompson and the MP5. Stay tuned for more cool stuff. Thanks for watching.